Creating an emissions inventory. If you've been working your way through the Air Aware program, you'll know by now that there are lots of different activities that emit particles and gases into the air. These particles and gases can threaten our health, while others, especially the gas carbon dioxide, can alter the climate. But which activities are causing the most problems? Burning fuels, for instance, petrol, wood, and coal, emits the gas carbon dioxide and some other toxic gases, as well as particles like soot. But how much you get of each depends on which fuel it is. If you want to understand what activities are most contributing to air pollution in your town, which is the first step to reducing air pollution, one way you can start is by creating an emission inventory. An emission inventory is a big table that shows things emitting pollution into the air area and how much pollution each of those contributing to the total. The table can then be turned into a range of different graphs and charts to make the results easier to understand. An inventory can be for a local area, like a town or city, or for a whole country. Let's see how you could make one for your class. Firstly, you need to list all of the things in your household that might emit pollution into the outdoor air. For most homes in New Zealand, that will include at least one car and maybe a wood-burning fire. For some homes, it could also include a gas oven or hob, maybe a truck or a motorbike. For whole town inventories, there might also be factories, ships, quarries, trains, orchards, farms, and other sources. For each thing, we now need to find out the emission factor. What's that? It's basically a measure of how polluting that thing is. For vehicles, the emission factor is the amount of pollution emitted for every kilometre driven. For most cars in New Zealand, you can find the emission factor for carbon dioxide on the website rightcar.govt.nz. On this web page, you can enter the number plate of your vehicle if you know it, or just the type of vehicle, for instance, Ford Ranger. You will then find that there are Ford Rangers from different years, so let's look up 2011 to 2014. And down here you will see carbon emissions, and it says the vehicle emits an average amount of CO2 gas, 232 grams per kilometre. That is our emission factor. Emission factors for other pollutants can be provided by scientists. These figures are worked out using a machine called a chassis dynamometer, where you can see that the exhaust pipe is plugged into some machines that are analysing the pollution. By comparing different cars, you'll find out that some emit more pollution than others. For wood-burning fires, the emission factor is the amount of pollution emitted for every kilogram of wood burned. This is also measured for some fires in a laboratory. For both vehicles and for fireplaces, newer models are usually less polluting than older models. So now you can enter the emission factors. The next piece of information in the inventory is how often you use it. This is usually worked out for a typical year. For a car, this means how many kilometers it has been driven all year. This can be worked out from the odometer. Every time a car goes for its WOF, the kilometers driven is recorded. In New Zealand, the average man drives 12,000 kilometers per year, and the average woman drives 8,000 kilometers per year. A different way of working it out, if the car makes the same trip most days, is to multiply the trip length by how many times that trip is made in a year. It's hard to get this exactly right, but usually a rough value is good enough. For a wood-burning fire, you need to know how many kilograms of wood is burnt in a year. You can work this out if you know how much wood you started the winter with and how much you ended up with. Or you can work out how much wood you would use on a typical day, and then calculate it by the number of days you use the wood burner. Again, if you're not sure, you can usually make a reasonable guess. The inventory now does some calculations to work out the total emissions from everything on the list. This is often done in a spreadsheet. You can now use this data to do some interesting analysis like plotting graphs and charts and finding out where most of the pollution is coming from. On our AirAware webpage, you will find a quiz and an opportunity to build an emission inventory for your own class.